Welcome in, everybody, to our deep dive today. We're going to be talking about Kurt Cobain, the life and the legacy of Kurt Cobain.
The legacy.
Who, of course, as I'm sure everyone knows, was the frontman of Nirvana. But Cobain's story kind of goes way beyond music, you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he became a cultural phenomenon, really. I mean, he sort of embodied all of the angst of Generation X, and his music.
Yeah.
It still resonates so strongly today.
And it all starts, his story.
Yeah.
In Aberdeen, Washington.
That's right.
Not really known as like a rock and roll mecca or anything.
Not quite a bustling metropolis.
Yeah.
No, it's a small industrial town.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting when you think about how that environment may have shaped his worldview.
Yeah, the source material I was reading said it was kind of almost like a melancholic vibe there. And I was like, man, did that seep into his music?
It's possible, right? You can definitely hear those echoes in his songwriting. And, you can't discount the impact of his childhood either, especially his parents' divorce when he was 9.
Yeah.
Seems to have really stuck with him.
Yeah, and then, he also had this chronic stomach pain he was always dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like that plus that, all these underlying currents running through his life. Do you think that could have contributed at all to his struggles, later on with his mental health and substance abuse?
Yeah, that's certainly a connection worth exploring. I mean, trauma, chronic pain, those things can have such a deep effect on a person.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because in the middle of all that, amidst those struggles, he finds this escape, and the escape is music.
Music.
Right? Specifically punk rock.
Yeah. Punk rock, like all that raw energy, rebellious spirit. Like it just seemed like the perfect outlet for, a kid going through all that frustration and angst.
Exactly. It was his way of processing the world, screaming out those frustrations. And it's that passion that led him to form Nirvana with Chris Novoselic.
Right.
And the drummer, Aaron Burkhardt, in 1987. Have you had a chance to listen to any of their early stuff?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's raw.
Yeah.
It's emotional.
Absolutely.
You can just almost feel Cobain's turmoil, pouring through the music.
Right.
It's pretty intense.
And their debut album, Bleach, came out in '89.
Yeah.
Started to get them noticed, especially in the underground scene. But it was really Nevermind in 1991 that launched them into a whole other stratosphere.
Yeah, Smells Like Teen Spirit, that song became like this anthem.
A generation.
Overnight. It was crazy. Why do you think that song and the album as a whole, why do you think it resonated with so many people so strongly?
Well, think about the context, right? This is Generation X, a generation coming of age after the Cold War, facing a recession. There's this sense of disillusionment with the world around them. And Cobain, through his music, I think, really became a voice for that disillusionment.
Interesting. So he was kind of like giving a voice to all these people.
Exactly. His lyrics express that apathy.
Yeah.
The anger, the confusion that a lot of young people were feeling at the time. He wasn't singing about love and happy times. He was tapping into something much, much deeper, much darker.
And in doing so, he helped usher in this whole new cultural movement, grunge.
Exactly.
It was huge.
Right.
But you got to wonder, that level of fame,
yeah,
that kind of attention,
it's a lot.
that's got to be a little overwhelming for anybody.
Fame is a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
It gives you a platform, gives you a voice, but it also brings intense pressure and scrutiny. And for someone like Cobain, who was already wrestling with so many inner demons, it's easy to see how fame might exacerbate those struggles.
Yeah, especially with, his addiction issues.
Yeah.
It's kind of heartbreaking to think about all that weight on his shoulders.
His heroin use, it started as a way to cope with the chronic pain he was in. But it became this really dangerous crutch in the face of, this overwhelming fame.
Right.
And then, of course, you have his relationship with Courtney Love. They got married in 1992.
92, yep. Very public relationship. And that same year, they had their daughter, Frances Bean Cobain. It's like, wow, trying to navigate parenthood.
Yeah.
Marriage, megastardom, all while dealing with addiction and chronic pain.
A recipe for turmoil, to say the least.
Yeah. And in the middle of all that, he's still creating music.
He is.
Their final studio album, In Utero, comes out in 93.
Yeah.
And it's raw. It's experimental.
It's so different from Nevermind, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, completely different.
Yeah.
Why do you think he went in that direction?
Well, Well, there are a few interpretations of that. Some people see it as a rebellion against the mainstream success of Nevermind, you know, like he's intentionally pushing back against what the music industry wanted. Others see it as a much more direct reflection of his deteriorating mental state.
Yeah.
The music is raw because his inner world is in turmoil.
It's chilling to think about, man.
Yeah.
In Utero almost becomes this, like, stark reflection of his internal struggle. And tragically, just a year later, in 1994, the world was just shocked by news of his suicide. Only 27 years old.
27 years old. It was devastating. I mean, it sent these shockwaves through the music world and beyond.
I mean, it was just this massive outpouring of grief from fans everywhere. It's hard to imagine the impact of losing someone like Cobain at the height of his career.
Yeah, it was a huge loss, and I think it forced a conversation that really needed to happen about, the pressures of fame, mental health, addiction. I mean, it's a conversation we're still having today.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And then you read his suicide note, it's just filled with this sense of just despair and exhaustion. He even talks about feeling disillusioned with fame, expresses his deep love for his family.
Yeah, and there's that haunting line, it's better to burn out than to fade away. It almost became a tragic mantra for some people. But it's important to remember, I think, that romanticizing self-destruction doesn't help anyone.
No, absolutely not. Cobain's death is, it's a tragic reminder that we need to take mental health seriously. Seek help when we're struggling. We can appreciate his artistry, the impact he had without glorifying the circumstances of his passing.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance, recognizing the human being behind the art, understanding the complexities of a life that's cut short. And, let's not forget, he wasn't just a musician, he was a songwriter, too.
That's a great point. Sometimes I think the sheer power of Nirvana's sound kind of overshadows the depth of his lyrics. What do you think made his words so impactful?
I think he had this incredible ability to tap into those universal feelings. Alienation, that search for identity, feeling like an outsider. These are emotions that so many people experience, regardless of their background.
That's if he gave people permission to feel those things.
Yeah.
To not have all the answers.
Exactly.
Which resonated with a lot of people, especially those feeling, lost or misunderstood.
And, his lyrics weren't always straightforward, but they were raw, they were honest, sometimes painfully relatable.
Yeah.
Even in his darkest moments, there was this vulnerability, this authenticity in his words that just connected with listeners.
For sure. Now, thinking about In Utero, their final studio album, we talked about how different it was from Nevermind. Raw, experimental. Why do you think he went in that direction?
Well, there are a few possible interpretations. Some see it as a rebellion against the mainstream success of Nevermind, almost like he was pushing back against the expectations of the industry. Others interpret it as a much more direct reflection of his mental state. The rawness of the music mirroring his inner turmoil.
It's interesting how In Utero is often described as being like abrasive or difficult.
Yeah.
Do you think that was intentional on his part?
It's hard to say for sure, but I think he was challenging listeners in a way, maybe even confronting them with his pain. It's not easy listening, but it is undeniably powerful. And musically, there's a lot going on beneath the surface.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. For a band, labeled as grunge, Nirvana's music was surprisingly intricate.
Right.
The dynamic shifts, the way they blended quiet and loud moments, his use of dissonance and feedback.
Exactly. It wasn't just three chords and screaming. There was real musical intelligence at play. Cobain was a very talented guitarist, experimented with tunings and effects, and the rhythm section, Chris Novoselic, Dave Grohl, they were incredibly tight dynamic.
Right. And I think people often focus on Cobain as like the driving force.
Yeah.
But you can't have that iconic Nirvana sound without the contributions of the whole band. It was this perfect storm of talent and energy.
Oh, for sure. And their music was more than just the sum of its parts, They created something unique that captured the spirit of a generation and continues to influence musicians today.
And their impact on music is undeniable. But it goes beyond that, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely.
Cobain's story, as tragic as it is, has sparked these essential conversations about the darker side of fame, the importance of mental health awareness, the need to address and treat chronic pain.
He almost became a cautionary tale, a reminder that even those who seem to have it all can be struggling immensely.
Hmm.
And, while his death was a devastating loss, it did bring these critical issues to the forefront of public discourse.
It made people think about the pressures artists face,
Hmm.
the toll that fame can take, the need to be more compassionate and understanding.
And perhaps, by acknowledging those complexities, by having these difficult conversations, we can create a world where fewer artists feel the need to burn out in order to be heard.
That's a powerful thought, and one that I think we should all carry with us as we continue to explore Cobain's music and his legacy. It reminds us that even in the face of tragedy, there's still hope for change and understanding. It's incredible to think that all these years later, decades later, Cobain's music still has this raw energy that just seems to connect with people on such a deep level.
It really does. I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier,
Yeah.
that authenticity, that vulnerability that just poured into every note.
Yeah.
It's like he wasn't afraid to expose his deepest emotions, even the really, really painful ones.
And by doing so, he kind of gave this voice to this whole generation, people who were, grappling with these feelings of alienation and confusion, angst. It's no wonder his music still resonates with every new generation that kind of finds Nirvana.
Yeah, it's almost like he tapped into this universal human experience, the
Yeah.
feeling of being an outsider, searching for who you are, questioning everything. And those emotions, I think, they just transcend time and culture.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it. A band coming out of this underground scene in Aberdeen, Washington, ended up having this global impact. What do you think made Nirvana's music so universally appealing?
Well, I think part of it, at least, is just the sheer power of the music. Those driving guitars, the way they moved between these quiet, these loud moments. You have Cobain's voice. It's so raspy, almost tortured. It's just this sonic experience. It grabs you, and it just doesn't let go.
It's true. Even if you don't understand the words, you can just feel the emotion, the intensity, the raw energy. It's almost primal. You know what I mean?
And then, of course, you have the lyrics, which, as we've talked about, explore these universal themes. Alienation, searching for identity, feeling like an outsider. I mean, those themes resonate with people of all ages, backgrounds.
And it's not just the darkness and the angst. There's also
Yeah.
this, longing, this search for connection,
Yeah.
a desire to just break free.
Exactly. There's a vulnerability there. Fragility in his words that makes him so relatable, even when he's singing about feeling lost and hopeless. It's that combination, the power and the vulnerability, that make Nirvana's music so compelling even today.
And let's not forget the cultural impact. I mean, Cobain, whether he meant to or not, he became a symbol of rebellion, challenging the way things were. He inspired a whole generation to be themselves, and to question authority.
He showed the world you didn't have to conform to be successful, that there was power in being different, in embracing your flaws. And his music, with its raw energy, DIY aesthetic, gave permission to so many to pick up an instrument and start a band.
I think that's one of the most lasting parts of his legacy. He inspired so many musicians to just be themselves, express themselves in an authentic way, create music that spoke to their experiences.
And in a way, that's more important than ever today. I mean, we live in this world that's just saturated with social media and, manufactured pop stars. It's a good reminder that real emotion, raw emotion, still has the power to connect on such a deep level.
It's a message that keeps resonating, reminds us to be ourselves, find our voice, never be afraid to express it, even if it's messy, even if it's imperfect.
Cobain's story might be filled with tragedy and darkness, but his music and the legacy he left behind, I think, offers this glimmer of hope. It reminds us that even when we're faced with pain and despair, there's still beauty, there are still connections to be made, and that we have the power to create something truly meaningful.
It's a really powerful message to end on. And I think it sums up the appeal of Kurt Cobain and Nirvana. He was a complex guy, a little contradictory, a flawed genius who really left a mark on the world.
His music still challenges us, moves us, and it reminds us of art's power to transcend time and connect with each and every one of us.
Well, thanks for joining us today. I really hope you gained some new insights into the life and legacy of Kurt Cobain.
Absolutely.
And maybe even rediscover the power of music to connect with your soul.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep listening.